All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, I'm Richard Taylor, and I'm going to give you a brief history of the integration of Goldsboro High School in 1969 and 1970. Now, we all know what's going on with the Goldsboro High School and the public school systems right now. So, I'm going to illustrate how what happened in 1969 and 70 is literally, a backdrop of what is going on right now. And people say if you don't understand your history or know your history, history is bound to repeat itself. And in some regards, some people think history is repeating itself all over again. Now, I got this article. This article was published in 1973, and it details the whole climate during that time, but also some of the challenges that were faced by both blacks and whites during the integration. Now, my father, who was a junior in 1969, or excuse me, 1970, when the school was integrated, told me some personal stories about how challenging it was, and I'll get on to that later. But most people during that time, especially black people, were mad because they couldn't graduate from Dillard High School. Dillard High School was named after Clarence Dillard, if I'm not mistaken, and he was a very prominent man in the community. And a lot of the students wanted to graduate, like that was sort of like a rites of passage. So when they had to go to the Goldsboro High School to integrate, they didn't, they wasn't too happy. As well as, of course, a lot of white students and white parents were not happy as well. And that's why I say that I graduated from a segregated high school, because while the black students were coming in the front door, most of the white students, or many of the white students, were going out the back door. And I'm going to give you some numbers on that. But the article, once again, is called Desegregation of Goldsboro High School, a case study. And it was written in 1973. So first of all, it talks about, the race relations and the race demographics in the town of Goldsboro. They talked about whites and blacks having very little interaction with each other, but they also had friendships, with each other as well. They mentioned that the sign that is on Highway 70, or that was on Highway 70, saying "Welcome to Clan Country." They mentioned that, but a black businessman stated, in regards to their race at that time, race relations, said, "We have fair race relations here. We have gotten our foot in the door. If there's a problem uptown, they'll come and talk to the black community. It's not all one-sided now." And that was shown one time. Some black radicals almost burnt up the town. They know you can push us now, but only so far. We have a little respect for each other now. With some, they respect us because they know if they flog us tonight, we're going to burn the town up tomorrow. So we get along now. So that talks about, I guess, the blacks starting to stand up for themselves, considering some of the treatment that was going on back then. But it also, once again, said that they had little relationships with each other because they lived in several separate neighborhoods. And actually, blacks couldn't go into certain neighborhoods at the time, and also whites were afraid or didn't want to go into black neighborhoods at the time. But they talked about one play, and that was the Messiah, where blacks and whites were allowed to go to the play, and that pretty much brought them together, which should be, because one person said both races discovered each other. There was a beautiful sharing in the whole situation. Years back, whites might not have taken that step. There were more whites than black this year, and that was once again at a play that both races were allowed to attend. Now, one minister's wife detailed also the race relations during that time. She said, "We have not been taught or the lack, once again, of black leaders." She said, "We have not been taught to use what we have. I'm guilty of that. I have a lot more information in my possession than I really put to use. And sometimes under distress, I remember something that I could use very well. But we become frightened and we are afraid. And when a real emergency comes along and threatens us, instead of thinking, we become so tense that we can't visualize anything except the worst happening. And most of us can't stand any more worse things happening to us. We've been threatened so much, and so we are not financially, emotionally, or any way equipped to handle any crisis. Now, that's once again a side effect from the years and the years of mistreatment where blacks have suffered so many trauma in America. So now let's talk about the desegregation plans in the process. Now everybody know in 1954, that is when the Brown versus Board of Education mandated that the schools be desegregated, right? So it talks about the Goldsboro City's enrollment, Goldsboro City school system enrollment of about 7,000 students. And once again, desegregation efforts were extended in 1965 when the city board adopted something called the Freedom of Choice Plan for student attendance. That means students could go to any school that they wanted to. So, and I think Glenwood Burton was the first black student to attend, I think, Goldsboro High School or all white school. And I think that was in 1965, 1966 or 68. Correct me if I'm wrong. However, this attendance, like I mentioned before, of black students going to white schools led to white students leaving those schools, either going to the county or private schools that were set up. Now, and just to illustrate that, they said in 1964, the schools were the school system. Now, that doesn't mean that the children were going to the same school, but the school system, white enrollment in the school system was 54%. And as they began to let blacks attend schools periodically, that enrollment in the school system, not in the particular schools, but in the entire school system, dropped over 13%, meaning that the white students were leaving the city schools and going out to the county or going to public schools. But they did, once again, start the Freedom of Choice Act in 1965. But the Goldsboro City School System and Board received a letter in 1966 saying that you have to comply by desegregating all schools for all attendance. And so the school board began to periodically allow blacks to attend other schools. And it says by 1968, about 650 students were attending formerly all white schools under the Freedom of Choice Plan. Now that was in 1968. However, a letter from Lord Henderson, the education chief for the Civil Rights and Department of Health, stated that members of my staff indicated to you are areas of probable non-compliance during the recent on-site visit as follows: faculty desegregation, student desegregations, freedom of choice. Basically, he was telling them, look, you haven't complied with federal and government regulations of desegregating all the schools. So he sent the cease and desist letter. But this is very important on what's going on now, because the then superintendent, Mr. Jerry Pascal, started to seek solutions that would comply with desegregating or integrating the schools with the minimal problems, right? And so this is how he did it. He started to bring teachers, parents, and administrators together to discuss the process. He involved the community. Unlike the current superintendent who just made a decision to move students and shuffle students around without garnering the community's opinions. So I applaud this And once again, this is not desegregation. That's what he's doing. So this should be an easy conversation. This guy had to bring blacks and whites together who had normally and formally not been able to get along, and tell them that this is going to happen. But we also want to express how it's going to happen, how it's going to affect them. And he got their opinions on the particular situation. It says blacks and whites were actually going into each other's home, and these people realize that it is something that's going to happen, so let's make it happen very smoothly. And this person quotes, what actually happened was that we decided that we are not going to compromise, but we found that we were all individuals striving for the same thing, meaning blacks and white. And most of us, I think, were very open, and we talked about it. This is the one thing I think that helped the Goldsboro City School, that these things were actually talked out. We drank coffee, ate donuts, and we talked about the things that bothered us. And I think that this is why things have worked out as well as they have. The process was very smooth due to our having a good board at the time. The chairman was a liberal man who did believe in equality. When this whole integration process was going on, they had open meetings for the general public, and usually before they acted, they solicited the feelings of both blacks and whites on a particular matter. Now, once again, this is totally in contrast of what the current superintendent did this past week. And once again, another black businessman talks about the ramification of open contact. Now, he mentioned that, he was at a meeting with a Klansman who had a business down the streets from him, and they were able to have a conscious conversation and share their feelings. And after that, he said that they walked out and shook hands. Now, that is what is needed, those difficult conversations. Sometimes, as they mentioned in this, there were sometimes heated debates. However, everybody got their point across, and as we see, eventually all parties came to an educated decision. And one parent once again mentioned the same thing. She was like, "Well, we all knew each other. It wasn't like we were strangers." And other parents spoke of being made to feel as if they were part of the process. The school board wasn't just sitting up on a hill. One thing that meant, once again, talking about engagement, right? One thing that meant so much to me as a mother was that before each individual decision, they would call together a group of parents who were interested or who wanted to come, and they would discuss the problem. They would ask advice, opinions, and it was open and free discussion. On one particular occasion, we went home, and I thought that there was no way on earth that they could integrate these schools without making, everyone happy. It just can't be done. But when she returned the following week, she said that, it was a stroke of genius on what those men had come up with. And so they started to change once again periodically. Now, on April 10th, 1968, they adopted the plan that they called the Manor Revisions, which said that they would, starting the 1969 and 1970, they would integrate grades 6 through 12. And at one time, like I said, my father was a junior. But they would keep the freedom of choice mandate to grades 1 through 5. Now, then all the Dillard students went to Goldsboro High School, and then in Goldsboro Junior High, which became Goldsboro Junior High School with 9th graders. Dillard, the black school, and Carver, the black middle school, were converted to middle school for all of the students. So once again, they kept the 1 through 5 schools segregated, right? And so On February 20th, 1970, Director for the Office of the Civil Rights again notified Goldsboro City System that it was still not in compliance to desegregate all of the schools. So the next year, they made a plan to desegregate all of the schools, and that plan were puts in place. Now they had to once again change the guidelines. So in April 1971, they adopted a plan to reorganize the elementary schools. Now, one of them that was closed was Greenleaf School. It was a black school. Because of the integration process, they did not get a lot of funding or a lot of enrollment. So they had to actually close the Greenleaf School. Now, at the closing of the Greenleaf School, a lot of the black members of the community were sad because Greenleaf School was also a meeting place, sort of like a cultural meeting place within the city. Now, with this, the school system was able to receive more federal funds. However, they were not able to receive as much Title I funding, and that is, I guess, for students who are performing lower level. And so that was one drawback from this. Now, they had a Citizens Advisory Committee, once again, that pretty much brought people together, human relations departments, schools, and places were open where blacks and whites could come together, kind of meet each other, see what was going on. And all black students were going to all white schools that they had never been able to go to, and also the converted Dillard and Carver schools were turned into public schools. So then white students were going to the all black schools that they never had attended. And so the faculty and the students both had to kind of get used to each other. Now, reactions to this desegregation. Now, many whites and blacks felt, as I mentioned earlier, that conflict was reduced when they found out that white opposition, the ones who didn't want to attend schools with blacks, they just deserted the school system. One black said, well, the radicals just drained themselves off from the public schools into private schools. They withdrew from the system. White flight also meant a significant loss of white students in the enrollment of the city schools, which affected the school's ability to receive funds. And like I said, the table shows that as soon as they started allowing black students the freedom of choice in 1965, white students started leaving the schools. This table shows right here that I'm looking at, between 1964 and 1973, 2,000 white students left the Goldsboro City school system, right? That's 2,000. I remember the enrollment was right at about 7,000 in the beginning. So 2,000 students left the Goldsboro City schools. Now, the article states, where did the white students go? We must ask. So they left the population of Goldsboro and increased the population in the Wayne County. So a lot of them went to the Wayne County area and the Wayne County schools. However, they also stated that many of the students went to these new independent day schools, and they named 3 of them in particular: Faith Christian, Goldsboro Christian School, and Wayne County Day School. Now, of course, some of them schools probably still exist under a different name or the same name or variations of that name. They said these three schools have enrolled many whites formerly in the Goldsboro City school system. And also they mentioned St. Mary's Catholic School, which was at the time over 50 years old, but they experienced a spark in enrollment. And like I said, over 2,000 white students left the community. Now, many of the whites who stayed in the public schools talked about how they received flack on both sides. Both sides, even, some from their family saying, okay, why don't you take your students out of these schools? But also, of course, from others, the other side where, it was conflict with blacks and whites going to school together. One businessman stated, if you are going to stick with the public schools and you are going to be involved, you better have a still head and a still heart, because you're going to get it from both sides. And the one white mother, said it placed a heavy burden on those whites who left or who stayed to work or go to school at the now integrated schools. Now I'm gonna backtrack real quick, because I remember distinctly talking about the pressures from their family members. I remember distinctly, once again, Dr. McFadden told me one day when I met with him at the school board, this was probably years ago, 10, 12 years ago maybe, and he said, yeah, I have to be honest. He said, when my son Drew was in high school, I asked him, don't you want to go out to Wayne Country Day where all your other friends left and with? And Drew was like, nah. And once again, I always commend him for that decision. But just remember, and now I'm talking to people who prefer the Wayne Country Days and Wayne Christian schools and, those private schools. Remember that those private Christian schools were essentially set up so that white students would not have to go to school with black students. Now, of course, it has changed today, but, the spirit of that never leaves, because I remember when I was a young kid and I was doing academically well in school, my mother said, well, don't you want to go to Wayne Country Day? And I immediately cringed. And I didn't know why at the time, but I felt the spirit of that school. When we played them in basketball and things, there was a certain spirit, that, we don't want you here. And, and that's, once again, how it felt to me. Maybe because that's how it was in the beginning. That's how those schools were set up. And once again, it said that the loss in white students hurt the enrollment and the system's morale and financial well-being, which is to be expected. So now it comes to the issues and concerns. And I got about 8 more minutes, so y'all stay with me real quick, and I'll kind of relate this to what's going on now. First of all, just going to a school in the black community across town was upsetting. This is what one white, a couple of white parents saying. It was just something you had to get used to. Another white parent said, we just had never gone into the black community before. The hard thing was just going into the community and the building itself. One person said, you have to change your attitude if you've been with integration a number of years and you have stuck with it and still believe in it. It's done a whole lot to us. I think we've had to bite our lip and put on our sunglasses and go to places that we thought we'd never enter into. I was scared to death the first time I took my child to middle school and had to leave her there with all those black people I didn't know. Sure, we were scared, but I'm a broader thinker, and I have a lot more compassion for black children than I did before. So once again, it's all about understanding, realizing that we are all people. We all have the same wants, needs, desires, and everything like that. And this parent actually realized that after getting over her initial fears. Now, another mother described her distress of sending her child to an all-black school. But when the staff, and the staff, once again, the white staff was made to go to the formerly all-black schools, she said that I changed my mind. And she said I was still scared, But she said, I am thrilled to death that my children have stayed in public schools when my family pressures were saying otherwise, right? And once again, white person said, I think people were bitter all over town about having particularly small children bus so far from home, where formerly they had been able to walk to school, which is understandable. I understand that fear. However, black people, they said, had no problem with this. And that's, once again, a testament of how they've been treated, because they were like, yeah, let's go to the white school. Yeah, they finally going to love us. Honestly, that's why there were no problems. And we're going to get to that in a minute. And once again, whites also had to adjust to having to teach black children. And also parents expressed their displeasure of having their white children go to school with black children who were deemed slower or not up to speed as their children. They said that they, one mother stated, we particularly were concerned about the lowering of the educational standards in the schools because of the lesser quality education that the blacks had received, and about putting black children together with white children to get black children to come up. They said that we were fearful that this would bring the white children down. But the studies show, and this is very telling. He said that the average score for white students was 5 standard scores below the national norm in reading. At the end of 5th grade, however, these students closed the gap and average scores were slightly above the national norm. During the same 4 years, black students were also coming closer to the national norm in reading, gained 3.2 standard score points above their 2nd grade average. Basically what they're saying is both black students and white students in the Goldsboro city was slow. They were slow. They were slower than the national norm. However, when putting them together and allowing them to work together, both student scores arose. So once again, that dispels the myth of, us not being able to work together and grow together and build together. This is a true testament of that. Now, they did more testing, and once again, they showed that, at the end of the year, all the students gained, showed a very positive rate of growth. Now, and I think this is where I'm going to end, because this is where the relation of what's going on today. So, black people, the concerns were the potential loss of institutions and traditions that were deeply rooted in their history and daily life in Goldsboro. When the decline in district's enrollment led to decisions to close Greenleaf and Virginia Street School. Now, Virginia Street School was the white school, and the Greenleaf School was the black school. They fought, black people fought to hold Greenleaf School open because, once again, it was the center of community life. It served as a meeting place for the Boys and Girl Scouts, civic groups, community groups, and churches, as well as night classes for adults. So that Greenleaf Church, that Greenleaf area, and I don't know if they're talking about the rebuilding Broken Places building. I don't know if that school has been torn down, but Greenleaf, I guess that's why they have such a staunch history, a staunch, close-knit community in that area, in that church. They said, however, the Virginia Street schools, the whites were not as disappointed with that school closing, because it was right on the fringes of the black and white neighborhood. But then they said to replace the Greenleaf staple of community, they instituted, the Wages and Head Start program, where the black congregation would continue to, replace that void that was left by Greenwood. Now, here we go. Now, here's the issue that I'm going to end on. A more symbolic issue among blacks when the upper grade schools merged was the loss of the name Dillard for the high school. The Goldsboro Senior High School was changed to Goldsboro High School when the black and white schools merged, and such names as Dillard and Carver were dissolved in the transition. Protests from the black community caused board members to state that decision to drop the names was based upon an unwritten law in which schools with names of people had to be changed. And so, today we have a school called Charles B. Aycock. At the same time that they were telling these black people who wanted the names Dillard and Carver to remain, Charles B. Aycock was opened in 1961. So here is another just blatant disregard for the traditions of the black community during this time 55 years ago. So, that was just funny to me to read that, where they would tell, okay, well, schools can't be named after people. All the while you have Charles B. Aycock School, which is named after Charles B. Aycock. But that is something. But it goes on to say, how Dillard Alumni Association, continued to fight for that that remaining of the school name. And it talks about how they were so strong in New York, Philadelphia, Washington, and Baltimore. Even today, everybody knows about the Dillard Alumni Organization. And even though they didn't get to keep their name, they still gave scholarships. And they said they gave scholarships to even white children once they, Goldsboro High School was changed, or the Dillard School was changed and forced to become Goldsboro High School. But the sentiments right here of this one member of Dillard Alumni stated, "We realized that 3 years ago, the last person that would graduate in the name of Dillard graduated, and there will be no more Dillard alumni per se. For this reason, we had meetings and we fought for the name of Dillard because we felt it was an identity we wanted to hold on to." And that goes once again to having nothing or having to fight for everything. Just that name is pretty much all we had, all the pride we have. Now that goes from years and years and years of abuse that, we want to hold on to that name because, that's pretty much all we had. That's where our pride laid out. And that's kind of, that's kind of reflective of, the black race in a whole in some regards, where, even like through slavery, everything was taken. So you have blacks who were, taken from Africa, or, they were taken from their families. They wanted to hold on to something because they had no identity. And if you tried to take something as simple as a name, which is very important because, to go deeper, our names and our culture and everything was changed when we were brought to slaves. So I guess that is that deep-rooted wanting to hold on to something that has been taken away from you when, or something that you have when everything else has been taken away from you. And so that's, sometimes, and I relate it to, sometimes when, blacks get into fights and shoot each other over shoes and over disrespect and over somebody spilling a drink on their clothes, or, owing them $5 and not paying. That is a deep-rooted side effect, once again, from slavery and having everything taken away from you and having what little that you have, you want to hold on to that and you want to value that over the amount that it should be. Now, once again, it should be valued, but, at what cost to your livelihood, at what cost to your growth and things of that nature. But they continue to fight for the school, but the school names, and as you see, they did change once again back to Dillard Middle School a while back. But one person made a good point, saying that we have such a smooth merger comparatively speaking, that we don't want to do anything that'll upset the apple cart, and they see this as a small thing, meaning they felt that changing the name of one of the schools to Dillard may upset the white community. The basic objection of doing anything to bring Dillard into the name of the school, that it will make whites dissatisfied. It would make some whites angry, and they would pull out of the school. And once again, if they pull out of the school, then there's less money. But then again, talks about, how once again the teachers and the staff continue to work together, and certain teachers had to go into certain neighborhoods that they never went before, black and white. White teachers initially expressed fear of driving through the neighborhoods, and once they got over that fear, they still felt some uncomfortable feelings about being around that many black children. And so I may do, like, this is a 71 page document. I'm only on page 33, and these are all facts, and these are, once again, this is how the times were then, but like I mentioned, it was only 55 years ago. So, of course, some people who were born with those attitudes of, leaving the school, those feelings once again may be innate, may be in their DNA, or in some regards may be taught. Now, of course, once again, I interact with people of all different races, colors, and creeds, and the things that I do. So I understand certain cultural differences and certain, ideological differences that, a lot of people have. And some people, once again, still have fear of the unknown. As I mentioned, when I was in the recovery program and we would go out to fundraise, I would be in the mountains somewhere, and I would be in towns where I did not see not one black person in 13 hours. And so that woke me up and realized, okay, well, these people don't not like black people. It's just they don't know anything about us, and the only thing they get sometimes is TV shows and movies and things like that. So that caused me to realize that some people don't care about black issues because they don't see black issues. And well, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother show. But I just wanted to show you how the quote unquote integration. Now, mind you, the population of white students in the public school system dropped 13% from 1964 to 1972. So that made them about 41% in 1972. So if you continue that, 41% in 1972, 31% in 1982, 21% in 1992 was when I got to high school, and it was much lower than 21%, maybe. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, y'all tell me what y'all think, but I literally think it was, it was more than 80% blacks by the time that I got to high school, because, as mentioned in this, and I would say I can attest personally, because I was one in the so-called academically gifted class, where most of my classmates, the people I attended class with, were white. We were set apart from the general population, I would say, because of our academic intelligence. But throughout the years, from elementary to junior high to high school, I noticed once again white students dropping off. And I was wondering, well, where they going? And it was very subtle, like I didn't notice. But, oh, they go to Wayne Country Day now. Oh, they go here. Or they go there. So I witnessed that personally. And that's why I always say I went to a segregated school in 1996, because, once again, the majority of the white students were deemed academically gifted, and they were in accelerated classes, as they say. But, in hindsight, most of those students were not or on equal footing as their counterparts, as we see as we have grown. We have people who were quote unquote in the slow classes or in the regular classes doing great things, amazing things, showing great aptitude in their particular profession. So once again, that was, I think, was a ploy once again to continue the segregation. And as I mentioned, now in 2024, Goldsboro High School is predominantly all black. So in 50 years, an all-white school turned into an all-black school. How did that happen? This report shows you how it happened. When the blacks came in the door, the front door The whites went out the back door. So now we have this situation with the Wayne School of Engineering. They brought the Wayne School of Engineering. Somebody told me reportedly to cater to black students who were able to excel and do well. However, they opened up the school to citizens from all around the county, and as we see, and I did a previous report that the school now, the Wayne School of Engineering, is now I think 65% white. If I'm not mistaken, y'all got the numbers. If not more, maybe less. Now they're taking that 65% white population who is not able to even accept all of the students that apply to it. They're moving into a bigger building so it can accept more students. Now, once again, if the growing population is Caucasian, then of course, who do you think is going to be accepted, or the majority of the population? So now you got this school with much more growth that stemmed from a formerly black school, and so you move that out of the way. You separate that school. Is this resegregation? Is this what this is? Resegregation? We'll see in a few years, right? Because it doesn't happen like this all black school, all white school didn't turn into an all black school overnight. It took time. So where are we going with this? So now you have the all black schools crammed into all black students crammed into the quote unquote C building. And so what is the end game? With this move that was made by then, now Superintendent Dr. Mark Witchard, once again, and this is my and a lot of people's concern, just like this superintendent did, he brought the community together. He at least had the compassion, the understanding to bring the community together and see, okay, how do y'all feel about this? This is what's going down, but how do y'all feel about this? This man made a decision in which he talked to none of the concerned people, none of the affected people, none of the affected parents of students that go to Wayne Academy that are now going to be bussed. Are we in the 60s again? They're going to be bussed out to Eastern Wayne and all the other students who are going to have to restructure their positioning and their livelihoods in the school system. This is eerily reminiscent to what happened 55 years ago. All these shuffling around of the schools. It's amazing. But once again, if you don't know your history, you're deemed to repeat it. But once again, we see that how this what happened 50 something years ago is relevant to now. Once again, my number 919-587-7782. If you got any information, any firsthand experience on this, because once again, a lot of people are still living from this time. So, there you have it, 919-587-7782. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. God bless y'all. Y'all have a good day.